A pin attacks a piece that is in front of a more valuable piece, but a skewer attacks the more valuable piece first. If you have not watched our video on a pin tactics, you can check back or click on the link or go to the channel and watch about the pin tactics. The pin attacks a piece that is in front of a more valuable piece in order to prevent the piece from moving so as to also prevent capturing the more valuable piece. But in the case of a skewer, the attack is on the more valuable piece while the piece you want to win is behind it. So today we are going to learn about the skewer, which is a tactic that most beginners forget and some advanced players or most advanced players really love to use it. So let's look at this particular position we are seeing on the screen. Black queen is on c6 and then the rook is on b7. So these two pieces here, they are going they are on the same diagonal, right? And if you now play your bishop on g4 to f3, you are going to be attacking the two pieces. Now, this is what a typical skewer looks like. Now you are attacking the most valuable piece or the most powerful piece on the board, which is the queen, in order to capture the rook, or you are even attacking two pieces at a time. So why this queen moves away, either here or any other place, you get to capture the rook in this situation, right? So this is a typical example of what a skewer is. In a pin, the more valuable piece is behind and cannot move. But in this case, which is a skewer, the more valuable piece is in front. And when it is forced to move, you get to capture the piece that is behind it. You know, think of it like a kebab skewer. You know, the most important piece got or gets stabbed first. And behind it, there is a dinner that is ready to be eaten. The skewer works with any piece, and if you move the piece in straight lines or diagonals, right? Especially pieces that move in straight lines or diagonal, which are your rooks, your bishops, and your queen. So all of these three pieces can be used to create a skewer, right? So you cannot create a skewer with your pawn and your knight. They are not part of the moves that or the pieces that moves on a straight line or diagonally, right? So if you want to also check how different chess pieces move, go on to our videos in the channel, and then we talked extensively about how different chess pieces move. So right here, we are going to explain some examples of skewer: rook skewer, queen skewer, bishop skewer, right? So these are the pieces that you can use for a skewer. So, and then we are going to talk about relative skewer and absolute skewer. So let's look at these typical examples. In this situation, you just have to play your bishop to f3 and you attack the queen. While the queen moves away, you get to what? You get to capture the rook, right? That is a typical skewer. So let's also look at this position here, right? So when you are talking about relative skewer, you are just saying that it is possible for you to move the most valuable piece away, right? You can move the most valuable piece away and prevent it from being captured, right? But when it is absolute skewer, right, you don't have any choice. In fact, in a relative skewer, you can even decide that you don't want to move the most valuable piece, or you don't want to move the more valuable piece away and you just want your opponent to capture it. But when it is an absolute skewer, we are talking of a situation whereby your king is under attack and there is a piece behind it. You just have to move your king away. You don't have any other choice, or you don't have any other thing to do, right? So in this situation now, the best move here you are going to play is to play your rook to d2, right? In this situation now, rook to d2, the reason why your opponent has decided to capture is because they have limited choice in this situation. They can either decide to move the queen away and save themselves, from their most valuable piece from being captured, but they risk getting checkmated, right? So if this queen moves away now, we most likely will have a move like this check, and then after rook's take, then the queen is going to, checkmate the opponent. Then after any defense, then eventually there's going to be a checkmate. So the best thing here is to get captured, and afterwards you don't capture with your queen in this situation. you capture with your bishop. So that is a relative skewer. So let's look at some examples of absolute skewer that I've mentioned, that I've talked about. An example of absolute skewer is this particular position that we have here. If you look at these typical positions like this, you need to watch out for what is the connections, especially on a straight line or diagonals, right? You need to watch out for where two pieces and the bigger piece is in front and the smaller ones is behind it. So if you look at these two pieces here, you will know that the king is the most important piece on the board, and then the queen is behind it. So in this situation, we have your absolute skewer, and where you get to check your king, your opponent's king, protected by with the bishop, which is protected by the queen on d2, right, d7 rather. So immediately the king moves away, you get to capture the queen. You get to capture the queen. So that is the absolute skewer. So in this second position, we also have almost the same thing to play, right? So here we have a possible skewer here. You can see that there is a queen, there's a king here, and there's a queen beside it, behind it rather. So, but then you can't directly play a check, right? You can't directly play a check. Reason being that if you play a check here in this situation, you most likely risk your what's it called? You risk your bishop getting captured. But that is the whole essence, right? There are different opportunities here. If you play bishop check, the queen is going to and the king is going to capture it on e5. Whereas if you bring your queen here and play queen to c3 check, the king is going to move away, and then there's going to just be an exchange of queens, right? So this is what you are going to play in this situation. It's also a tactics, right? You play check, yes, you risk being captured. And the reason why you risk being captured is that you want to move the king away from their queen as far as possible, as far away as possible, right? Because to prevent whenever you are ready to capture, to prevent them from getting too close. Compare this to when the queen was here and the queen is delivering the check and the king was here on f6. When you check and the king moves here, they are already protecting the queen. So now when you play queen here, queen to c3 check, and the king moves away, right? You can then deliver a beautiful capture of your opponent's queen, and then you win a bigger piece by sacrificing the bishop. So this is a typical example of the skewer. So finally, we've looked at the bishop skewer, we've looked at the um queen skewer, and let's also take a look at the what's it called, the rook skewer. So in this situation now, how can you use the skewer for a position like this, right? So when you play um queen rook to a7 check, right? Okay, that seems to be the wrong move in this situation. So let's say you play a move like queen, the queen capture pawn check, and the queen is captured back by your opponent queen. Now you are ready to use the skewer. Now you can, if you now play this here to a7 check and the king moves away, you get to capture the piece behind the king, right? So when you play this and then you get to capture back the queen, right? So that is an example of the rook skewer. So we've been able to look at the rook skewer, the bishop skewer, and then the queen skewer, where you did get to sacrifice the bishop, and then when the king moves forward, you then check with the with your queen to capture your opponent's queen. So the question then is, how do you spot skewer in your games? Like, how can you look at your game and then think of, oh, um, okay, I know how to find a pin, I know how to pin down a piece, but how do I find or spot a skewer? So here is how to train yourself to find a skewer, right? Or to find skewers in your game. You look at your opponent or your enemy's king and then trace the particular rank or file and even the diagonal, right? So you trace it out and check where they are pointing to, right? You check where they are pointing to. So in this particular situation now, I'm going to look at my opponent king. So this is my opponent king here, and then this is the diagonal. This is the what's it called? This is the rank, and then this is the file, right? So if you look at this particular diagonal, you can see that there is a um, queen sitting down in this particular position here. So how do you play the skewer here? How do you use an absolute skewer to in order to win your opponent's bigger piece by attacking the most valuable piece in this particular situation? So that's the first question. I'm going to solve this, but this is the question you need to ask whenever you want to use the skewer. You look at where your opponent king is, the diagonal, the file, and then you ask yourself, is there any valuable piece on any of those lines? Is there any valuable piece on the rank? Is there any valuable piece on the file? Or is there any valuable piece on the diagonal? So in this particular situation, there is a valuable piece on that same diagonal, the queen, which is far away, right? So if there's anyone on that same side, maybe the queen, the rook, the bishop, if the answer is yes, you then ask yourself that, can I give the check on that same line from the other side? So is it possible for me to check the your opponent's king at the other end of the diagonal and then capture the queen? So if my piece reaches the far and the far end of that line, it will attack the king, and then you get to have an indirect attack on the piece that is sitting behind the king, right? So this is the a typical example we can use. So let's dive into solving this. All right, so let's look at this particular position that we have here now. So the first question is that, where is my opponent king located? So this is the file, this is the rank, this is the file, and this is the diagonal. Is there any piece at the opposite end of these lines that I've drawn here? So for the king, that, like, the black pieces, right? So you can see that it is only this diagonal that we have a queen here. So how can I put my king, my own piece at the other far end of this or behind the king in order to capture this piece here? So there are a lot of things going on here. So first, let's look at the positions where all of these pieces are occupying. We have my opponent's king on f8, and then the queen is on a3. I have my own queen on e3, and then there's a knight in between them on d6, that is like in between these two pieces. So how do I go about it? Like, the first thing you need to do is that you've been able to determine that there is a particular diagonal where the queen and the king are both on. So how do I make sure that now I know that there is nothing behind this board, like there are no squares extending beyond this board, except for these 364 squares that we 64 squares that we have. So I need one way or another to bring my king like towards this end, so that my own queen to bring this king towards this end, and my own king can then my queen can come behind it, and then I get to capture this queen here. So right, in this situation, you don't have any cause for delay, right? There's nothing to delay about. You cannot make a move that is not giving you an advantage. So for every move I'm going to make in this situation, there's going to be a check there, because I know that is the only way my opponent would not have like a rest of mind. That is the only way they need to keep moving their king. Else, I get to get my knight captured, or even a check coming up, right? So the first move is a check here. So my opponent has limited squares to go. I'm already controlling the squares, and I have a pawn here as well. So my opponent and I already have a check here. So the only place my opponent can go is this place. And if they should come there, I'm going to give a check, and eventually I'm going to checkmate, right? So they don't want that. So they need to come out here. After that, I'm going to move closer by playing a check here. So my opponent can decide to come here, right? So way in which I'm going to like deliver another check and find a way to checkmate, right? So they cannot afford to come here, and they cannot come here either. So the only move is to capture the knight. Now I want them to capture the knight, right? Because I know that when they capture the knight, they are still moving on that same diagonal I want them to be. And at the same time, now I've created a position where I can now put my own queen behind the knight to create a skewer, right? So now I have my skewer positioned, already set, and I can now play my queen to f8 check. And when the king moves away, I capture the queen. Now I've won the queen, and it's an easy win for me in this particular position. So you see now that this is a typical example of how to play the skewer. Sometimes it might not be possible that the skewer will be open or will be readily available. Sometimes you'll be the one to create the path if you see that the two pieces, the king or any other piece at all, is behind or in front of a smaller piece. you try to formulate or create a skewer for yourself, and then you execute the tactics. The most common skewer situations to watch for is one where a king and a rook on the same file, right, or on the same rank, with your with your rook being able to check your opponent's king at the other hand. But you have to make sure that the king is a little bit far from the rook, right, either on the same file or on the same rank. And then you check the king at the other side. When the king moves away, you capture the rook, right, and you have to ensure that the rook is not protected. So you have to watch for that. And then the second one is a king and a queen, if they are on the same diagonal, right, and then you have a very beautiful bishop. Most times that is why people play what we call fianchetto. I'm going to explain what fianchetto is maybe in our future videos, right? But in a situation of that diagonal of a queen and a bishop and a king, when the king is there, you just find a way to go behind it, just like the example I've shown you, and then you capture the queen. And lastly, you have a king and a queen on the same file, right, or on the same rank. And then after a lot of pieces exchange in between them, you end up being able to capture the queen, right, when the king is far away from the queen. So I'm going to give us like a little puzzle now for us to try out this skewer, and then I want to see if we actually understood everything that we've talked about. So let's look at this particular position here. You have a queen here, you have black queen here, and then the king is here. If you look at it now, let's look at the rules that we stated. You look at the rank, you look at the file, and then you look at the what's it called, you look at the diagonal, right? So in this situation, we see that the two pieces, they are not on the same in any of these um, um, lines that I've drawn. So just like the examples that I did, like the last one, you just have to make sure that they are in any of that position. Either the king and the queen are on the same file, the same rank, or the same diagonal, in order for you to execute the skewer. And then you also need to sacrifice, right? So this is what we need to do in this situation. So I want you to pause this video, look at this puzzle. It is white turn to play, and then can you find the skewer? You have about 10 seconds to do this. Okay, if you have been able to spot the solution, very good of you. You've come a long way, you've been learning. But if you have not, let's go on it together. Then you can also try to practice it on your own. So let's look at this position. Again, like I said, you have to look at the rank, the diagonals where the king is, and then find a way to achieve your skewer. But in this situation, none of that is possible. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to play my rook to h8. Right. The reason why I play my rook to h8, attacking this queen, is because I want the skewer to happen. I want the skewer to happen. Now I've been able to do one thing. I've been able, by sacrificing my rook, I've been able to put the king, the black king, and the black queen on the same diagonal, right? And I have my queen here. Now I'm able to play my skewer, and then I get to capture my opponent's what's it called, my opponent's king, right? So this is how to solve this particular puzzle. So one move, checking the attacking the queen, get captured, and then you play your bishop, right? So tomorrow we are going to look at one of the strangest and the most misunderstood rules in chess. We call it en passant. En passant is a very strange move, right? It's just a little bit similar to castling, but castling is not very strange. But we have the en passant, which is strange. Most beginners, some beginners, have never heard of what this en passant is. So I want you to subscribe, and I will see you then.